Hello and welcome to the Remote Revolution, a podcast by Virtual Mojo. This is where we explore how modern businesses are transforming the way they work through remote teams, virtual support, and smarter operational strategies. In each episode, we bring you insights, conversations, and practical ideas to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and growing companies build efficient, scalable, and future-ready organizations. If you're looking to work smarter, scale faster, and unlock the power of remote talent, you're in the right place. Let's begin.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Remote Revolution podcast. I'm Anik, and today I'm joined by Umaima, who brings real industry experience in remote staffing and operations.
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get into this one.
So imagine this. You've just hired this brilliant developer halfway across the globe. You set them up with a company email, you give them a list of general goals, and then you just sort of step back and wait for the magic to happen.
Okay, the classic expectation.
Yeah. You're expecting this boundless, borderless productivity. But instead, what do you actually get? You get missed deadlines, these endless, frustrating Slack threads, and this creeping sense of panic that you have absolutely no idea what anyone is actually doing.
Oh, I've seen that exact panic so many times. It really is the great modern business paradox. We are sitting on access to the most expansive, diverse talent pool in human history, right? Yet, you talk to managers today, and they're just pulling their hair out. They're wondering why a simple project takes 3 weeks to coordinate, and they usually just assume the whole remote work experiment is a complete failure.
And that is exactly the core mystery we're unraveling today. We are pulling our insights from this really fascinating piece of source material. It's called The Blueprint for Structured Remote Teams.
Yeah, it's a great read.
It really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to basically look under the hood. We want to unpack what a properly structured remote team actually looks like from the inside. And in the process, debunk some massive, pervasive myths about why remote work supposedly breaks down.
I think we really need to start by establishing a baseline truth that this blueprint just hammers home right out of the gate, and that is hiring incredibly smart, capable remote talent is just step one.
Right, just the beginning.
Exactly. You can hire the best people on earth, but the actual difference between a remote team that thrives and one that spirals into absolute chaos comes down to a single, highly underappreciated word, and that word is structure.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can build the perfect remote team, we really need to examine the wreckage of the bad ones,
Yeah, the cautionary tales.
Right. And we have to understand why they usually break down in the first place. The source material spends a lot of time talking about the misdiagnosis. What exactly are managers getting so wrong here?
Well, the misdiagnosis is everywhere. The standard approach that most businesses take, and it is deeply flawed, is what we can call the set it and forget it mentality.
Right.
They hire someone, they assign a few tasks, they set a loose deadline, and then they literally just step back and expect things to run smoothly based on, pure assumption.
I have to jump in here because how do managers even fall into that trap? Nobody thinks management is just sending an email and vanishing for a week.
You would be surprised. It happens because of this illusion of competence. A manager hires a senior professional, sees a great resume, and assumes, they're a professional, I don't need to hold their hand.
Right, like they should just figure it out.
Exactly. So they don't provide a system. And when the inevitable symptoms of this unstructured approach pop up, you start seeing inconsistent output, sudden delays, a complete lack of clarity on what is actually being worked on. The knee-jerk reaction from management is almost always to blame the person.
Yeah, they make it a character flaw. They say, this person just isn't a self-starter, or they aren't motivated, or remote work just makes people lazy.
Precisely. They diagnose a character issue. But the blueprint highlights this massive paradigm shift. It argues that in the vast majority of cases, the problem isn't the individual at all.
It's the system.
It's the system, or rather, the complete lack of a system. But honestly, even before we get to the system, there's another layer of misunderstanding here that causes that chaos. It's about roles.
Oh, interesting. What do you mean?
Well, a lot of businesses fundamentally misunderstand the type of remote talent they're actually hiring. The blueprint breaks this down really well. People tend to confuse freelancers, virtual assistants, and managed talent
Oh, I see. They use the terms interchangeably.
all the time.
Like-
And it causes so much friction. Like, a freelancer is highly specialized, right? You bring them in for a specific project, you say, build me a website, they build it, and they leave. It's transactional.
Right. They manage their own time. You just care about the final product.
Exactly. But then you have a virtual assistant or a VA, and VAs are generally task-based. They are great, but they need you to tell them exactly what to do every single day.
Like enter this data into this spreadsheet or schedule these meetings.
Yeah, highly repetitive, structured tasks. But here is where the mistake happens. A manager will hire a VA, pay a VA rate, give them zero daily structure, and expect them to act like managed talent.
Wait, break down managed talent for me. How is that different?
Managed talent is someone who actually integrates into your team and owns a process. They aren't just checking off a daily to-do list you handed them. They are actively driving a workflow forward. But even managed talent, and this is the crucial part, they still need a structured environment to do that.
Okay.
They need to know how your company operates.
Right. You can't just drop a brilliant project manager into a totally chaotic company and expect them to fix everything without giving them the tool.
Exactly. If you don't define the role and you don't have a system, everyone just ends up frustrated.
Let's make this concrete for the listener.
Yeah.
Because if you are listening to this right now and you have like 6 unread messages on 3 different platforms asking for status updates, you are living in this nightmare.
Oh, absolutely.
What does this lack of a system actually look like on the ground?
It looks like a digital free-for-all. Tasks aren't assigned through any kind of centralized, trackable system. They are fired off through casual messages.
Just totally random.
Yeah. A quick ping on Slack asking for a design tweak, a WhatsApp message from a CEO with a, great idea, maybe a passing comment in a Zoom chat about who should handle the client email. And that chat disappears the second the meeting ends.
Oh man, I am getting secondhand anxiety just hearing you describe that. Because communication is scattered across 5 different platforms, there is absolutely no central tracking of what is done, what is pending, or what is delayed.
And that is the psychological toll the blueprint really focuses on. Performance ends up being based entirely on assumptions rather than visibility. Management assumes the worker knows exactly what to do and when it is due.
Right, and the worker just assumes they have all the info.
Or worse, they assume another team member is handling the next step because somebody vaguely mentioned it on a Tuesday morning stand-up. So even if the team is highly capable, the output becomes completely unpredictable.
It makes me think of trying to plan a massive group vacation entirely through a single chaotic text thread.
Oh, that is the perfect analogy.
Right, you know exactly the kind I mean. You have like 15 people in an iMessage group. Everyone is talking at once, throwing out ideas for restaurants, sending links to different Airbnbs, sharing random emojis. It feels like a ton of activity. It feels like you are actively planning a trip.
Because your phone is just constantly buzzing.
Exactly. It's buzzing nonstop. But nobody actually knows who is booking the flights. Nobody knows who is putting down the deposit for the rental car. You have a mountain of communication, but zero predictable output. And when you all show up at the airport, it's a disaster, and everyone is mad at each other.
That is exactly what unstructured remote work looks like. The text thread gives the illusion of productivity because there is movement and noise. But without a structured system of assigning responsibility and tracking progress, it's literally just noise.
Yeah.
And in a business setting, that noise eventually leads to missed client deliverables, massive burnout, and a lot of resentment on both sides.
So since scattered messages and assumptions clearly lead to disaster at the airport, or in this case, the business front, how do we flip the script? How do we move from diagnosing the chaos to actually fixing it?
Well, we have to introduce the antidote. The blueprint shifts us from the problem to a very specific structural solution. It walks us through 4 essential components of a properly structured remote team. Think of them as like 4 load-bearing pillars. If you remove even one of these, the entire roof caves in.
Okay, let's dig into these. First one on the source list is clear workflows. But wait, isn't a workflow just a corporate buzzword for a to-do list?
Not at all. A to-do list tells you what needs to be done. A clear workflow dictates exactly how it gets done, step by step, from assignment to completion.
Oh, okay, the how.
Right, it cannot just be an email saying, write this quarterly report.
Yeah.
A true workflow maps the entire journey of the work. Like, here is where you find the data, here's the exact template you use, here's the specific person who reviews it when you have a first draft, and here's the final approval process. Nobody is ever left sitting at their desk guessing what the next step is.
That makes total sense, because that eliminates that frustrating scenario where a remote worker finishes their specific part of a project, but because they don't know where it goes next, the work just sits on their hard drive for 3 days while they wait for instructions.
Exactly. It prevents work from just stalling out in no man's land.
But even if you map out that perfect workflow, how do you actually know anyone is following it without turning into, like, a digital hall monitor?
That is where the second pillar comes in, which is task tracking. This is the mechanism that provides central visibility into what is happening at all times. It is the direct antidote to your chaotic group text thread.
I have to challenge this, though, because isn't maintaining a massive project management dashboard or some huge spreadsheet just replacing communication chaos with administrative chaos? I mean, nobody wants to spend their entire day updating green, yellow, and red status dots.
If the tracking system is clunky, yes, absolutely. But modern task tracking isn't about administrative busy work, it's about asynchronous visibility.
Asynchronous visibility. Okay.
Yeah, it means having a single source of truth. Anyone, at any time, should be able to look at the tracker and know exactly what is done, what is in progress, and what is blocked. You don't update it to please your boss, you update it so the system works.
Okay, so I don't have to send a Slack message at 2 p.m. asking, hey, where are we on the marketing graphics? Because the tracker already tells me the graphics are in the review stage.
Exactly. It saves hundreds of micro interruptions a week. But a tracker is useless if we don't know who is supposed to be moving the task forward. Which brings us to the third pillar. Define roles and responsibilities.
Let me guess, this is to combat the bystander effect.
You nailed it. In unstructured teams, two people will often assume the other person is handling a task, so neither of them actually does it. Defined roles mean that for every single step of that workflow we just talked about, there is a specific name attached to it. The buck stops with a clearly identified individual. There's no ambiguity.
So if the graphic design is stuck in the review stage on the tracker, I know exactly who the reviewer is. I'm not blasting a message to a channel of 50 people hoping someone answers.
Precisely. You know exactly who holds the baton. And that leads logically to the final pillar, consistent communication.
Now, what's fascinating here is how the source very specifically uses the word consistent, not constant. I feel like those words get used interchangeably a lot, but the blueprint treats them like totally different concepts.
They are completely different. What's really fascinating here is that the blueprint identifies constant communication as one of the primary drivers of remote burnout.
Constant communication, like always being on.
Yes. It's that nightmare of being pinged on Slack every 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It's the expectation that you must reply within 60 seconds or your boss thinks you're just watching Netflix. It shatters deep focus and creates an environment of perpetual anxiety. You're always watching for that little typing bubble to appear.
It's the digital equivalent of someone tapping you on the shoulder all day long while you are trying to write a complex line of code or draft a legal document.
Exactly. Consistent communication, on the other hand, is structured and intentional. It means having a set daily stand-up or a weekly wrap-up email or specific agreed-upon hours where the team overlaps for synchronous collaboration. It is predictable.
So you know when to talk and when to work.
Right. You know exactly when you are expected to communicate and, just as importantly, when you are expected to put your head down and do deep work without interruption.
Here's where it gets really interesting to me, though. Doesn't implementing all this rigid structure, these step-by-step workflows, and this central task tracking completely kill the flexibility and agility that makes remote work appealing in the first place? I mean, people want to work remotely to escape the rigid corporate cubicle, not to be trapped in a digital one. Does all this structure just ruin the vibe?
It's a totally valid concern, and honestly, it is a trap a lot of modern, quote-unquote, cool tech companies fall into. They avoid structure because they want to stay agile and scrappy.
Right, they want to move fast.
But the blueprint argues the reality is the exact opposite. Structure doesn't kill agility, it enables it. Think about the mechanics of it. If you don't have these 4 pillars in place, where is all your daily energy actually going?
I guess it's going into figuring out how to do the work. finding the lost file in an old email chain, or tracking down the person who is supposed to approve the budget.
Right. You are spending all your mental energy managing the chaos instead of executing the work. When the workflows are clear, when the tracking is centralized and roles are defined, the team doesn't have to think about how to coordinate. The system handles the coordination.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that frees up all their cognitive bandwidth to actually execute the work creatively and quickly.
I see. So the structure is what allows you to be creative because you aren't bogged down in administrative panic all day.
Exactly.
But having these 4 pillars built on paper is one thing. How do you actually maintain them day to day without driving yourself and your team absolutely crazy?
Well, that brings us to the engine of success for a remote team: visibility and accountability. And the mechanism to achieve that is proper reporting.
Reporting. I mean, just the word makes me want to yawn. It sounds incredibly bureaucratic. But the blueprint makes a really compelling case for why it is the literal lifeblood of remote work. Explain the mechanism here. Why is reporting so crucial?
Because without visibility, management is fundamentally just guessing. You are flying blind. Proper reporting, whether it's an end-of-day asynchronous summary, a weekly dashboard review, or an automated update from your tracking software, it allows a team to know exactly where issues exist in real time. The core mechanism here is time. Time zone agnostic reporting literally buys you hours, sometimes days, of reaction time.
Give me an example of how that time mechanism works in practice.
Okay, let's say you are a manager in New York and you have a developer in Tokyo. If you rely on unstructured chats, you might not realize the developer is stuck on a bug until you wake up the next day, and by then they have gone to sleep. You lose a full 24 hours.
Ouch. Yeah, that adds up fast.
It really does. But with asynchronous reporting and task tracking, the developer logs the bottleneck before they log off. You wake up, see the flag on the tracker, and reassign resources immediately. Reporting allows you to act early rather than reacting later when a deadline has already been blown.
You intervene on Tuesday rather than scrambling on Friday at 4:59 p.m. when the client is asking for the deliverable.
Exactly.
That Friday afternoon scramble is exactly what causes remote workers to quit. But when we talk about tracking work and reporting, it naturally brings up a very sensitive topic.
Yeah.
Micromanagement.
Oh, yeah.
How do you track work to this degree without becoming the dreaded hovering boss who is just checking green activity dots on an app to make sure people are moving their mouse?
The blueprint draws a very sharp, vital line between the two. Micromanagement is behavioral. It relies on over-the-shoulder hovering and constant check-ins because the manager fundamentally does not trust the worker. Systemic accountability, on the other hand, is built in and based purely on clarity. Think of it like a physical assembly line in a factory.
Okay, an assembly line. How does that translate to a remote team, though?
On an assembly line, the conveyor belt dictates the pace and flow of the work. The foreman doesn't have to stand behind you and yell at you to work faster or constantly ask what you are doing. The system physically moves the part to you, you do your defined role, and you pass it down the line. In a structured remote team, the workflow and the tracker act as that conveyor belt.
Oh, I get it. So because the expectations are totally transparent from the start, because the workflow and the deadlines are mapped out on a shared tracker, the system itself acts as the manager.
Yes. The manager doesn't have to send a message asking, "Are you working today?" They just look at the tracker and see that the design file moved from the draft column to the review column. It completely removes the emotional friction. It's not about watching people breathe. It's about watching the work progress.
Which really ties back to our first point about the misdiagnosis.
Okay.
If accountability is systemic, what happens when things still go wrong? Because let's be real, even with the best system in the world, things will go wrong. People get sick, clients change their minds, software crashes.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, when performance expectations are completely clear, when the workflow is documented, and something still goes off the rails, the structure makes it incredibly easy to identify the exact point of the breakdown. You don't just throw your hands up, you look at the system.
Right, you trace it back.
Exactly.
But
You ask, did the handoff from design to copy happen on time? Yes. Did the final review by the legal team happen? No. Okay, we isolated the bottleneck.
the ultimate takeaway here is incredibly empowering. Instead of immediately pointing fingers and blaming individuals, you improve the process. You say, our legal review process is too slow and broken, let's fix it, rather than our project manager is terrible at his job, let's fire him.
Exactly. It shifts the entire organizational culture from a toxic culture of blame to a culture of continuous improvement. And that is a much healthier, psychologically safe environment for a remote worker to operate in. They know they won't be thrown under the bus for a systemic failure they had absolutely no control over.
All right, I really want to see this in action. To prove that all of this isn't just nice-sounding theory for a business seminar, let's look at what happens when these structural principles are actually applied in the real world. The source gives us this fascinating scenario, essentially an A/B test of remote work. Break this down for us.
It is the ultimate control experiment for business operations. Imagine two businesses, Company A and Company B. They have the exact same team size, they operate in the exact same industry, and they have just hired remote talent with identical skill levels and experience. On paper, at day zero, these two companies should produce the exact same results.
But they don't.
No, they don't.
Because Company A implements the 4 pillars. They build clear workflows for their projects, they centralize their task tracking on a dashboard, everyone has a defined role, and communication is consistent and intentional. They rely entirely on systemic accountability.
Right. And Company B takes the standard, flawed approach. They hire good people, assign them tasks via chat, and just assume everything will work itself out because they hired, professionals. They have zero formal structure. Let's trace a specific project, like launching a new client website, through both companies.
Okay, I imagine in week 1, both companies probably look exactly the same. Everyone is running on the adrenaline of a new job. Everyone wants to impress the boss. So the lack of structure doesn't hurt them yet. But where do the structural cracks actually start to show?
The cracks show up at the very first handoff. Let's look at week 3. At Company A, the designer finishes the website mockup. They upload it to the tracker, tag the copywriter, and log off. The copywriter, who is in a completely different time zone, wakes up, sees the notification on the tracker, knows exactly what their role is, and starts writing the text. Seamless.
And at Company B?
At Company B, the designer finishes the mockup and DMs a link to the copywriter on Slack. But the copywriter is asleep, and while they are asleep, 3 other team members use that exact same Slack channel to discuss a completely different project. So the link gets buried.
Oh no, I can see where this is going.
Yeah. The copywriter wakes up, doesn't see the link, and assumes the designer is running late. They don't want to micromanage, so they don't ask. 3 days pass. Friday arrives, the client wants to see the website, and it's not done.
And the manager at Company B panics and blames the copywriter for not being proactive, or blames the designer for not communicating clearly.
Exactly. Now multiply that single miscommunication by 50 tasks a week over 6 months. The performance gap between the structured team and the unstructured team doesn't just grow, it compounds massively. At Company A, they are turning remote work into a true operational advantage. Because they aren't wasting time figuring out how to coordinate, they are doing the work faster. When they onboard a new client, it's effortless because the workflow is already built. They start pulling ahead, expanding their capacity, and taking on more market share.
Meanwhile, Company B is experiencing a slow, agonizing descent into burnout. The managers are exhausted because they spend 10 hours a day chasing down status updates and putting out fires. The remote workers are incredibly frustrated because they never have clear instructions, and they constantly feel like they are failing, even though they're working incredibly hard. Eventually, the top talent just quits because the environment is too chaotic.
And Company B's management will inevitably conclude, remote work is a failure. We need to force everyone back into the office. They misdiagnose the disease completely. They blame the geography instead of the geometry of their operations. They lacked the structure.
So what does this all mean for you?
It means that the foundational premise of how we view remote work really needs to evolve. We need to stop looking at it as just a modern hiring strategy and start treating it as a rigorous operational discipline.
Let's summarize the core lesson we are pulling from this blueprint. Remote teams do not fail because of distance. Time zones, oceans, and physical separation are not the actual enemies of productivity. They fail because of a lack of structure.
Structure is the ultimate enabler. When implemented correctly, it delivers 3 crucial things that every business needs to survive. Clarity, so everyone knows exactly what to do. Consistency, so that output is reliable week after week. And control, so management can steer the ship and spot icebergs without having to micromanage the people rowing the oars.
And this directly applies to you, the listener. Whether you are a manager who is currently pulling your hair out over a remote team that just isn't clicking, or whether you are a remote worker who feels like you are drowning in chaotic messages and constantly shifting expectations. Before you give up, before you blame yourself or your team, audit the system. Do you have the 4 pillars? Fixing the process rather than blaming the people is the very first step to regaining your sanity.
It becomes a much more solvable mechanical problem once you realize you just need to build the tracks.
Which leaves us with a truly fascinating thread to pull on. We've spent this entire deep dive looking at how missing structure destroys remote teams, primarily because the physical distance makes the chaos painfully obvious. But I want to leave you with this final lingering thought to mull over. If a lack of formal structure is the true culprit behind remote work failures, how much invisible, unstructured chaos is hiding right now in traditional in-person offices, masked only by the fact that people happen to be sitting in the same room?
That is a brilliant question. Proximity often hides terrible processes. Just because you can see someone typing doesn't mean the system is working.
It really makes you wonder how much inefficiency we accept just because everyone is in the same building. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the blueprint for remote success. We hope it gives you the tools to audit your own systems, build something stronger, and make your work life a whole lot less chaotic. Take care, and we will catch you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Remote Revolution. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and share it with other professionals who are building the future of work. To learn more about how Virtual Mojo helps businesses grow with highly trained virtual assistants and remote support teams, visit www.virtualmojo.com. For inquiries or collaborations, reach out to us at contact@virtualmojo.com. Until next time, keep building smarter systems and embracing the future of work.